Hello there, Final Fantasy TCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and welcome to episode 12 of Rules Roundup, where I go over rules questions that were asked in the unofficial Final Fantasy TCG Discord server this week, and go over what the answers are to those questions, while at the same time giving you a chance to kind of check your own rules knowledge and either see if you've got all this stuff down already, or if there's some stuff you weren't aware of, and kind of teach you a little bit there, or maybe get some of the nitty gritty details that maybe you didn't know about some of the rules. So, this week also we're going to have 10 questions again, just like last time, which means it'll be an opportunity for you to really quiz yourself if you feel so inclined. You'll be able to give yourself an easy little grade there, depending on how many you got correct. And if you don't want to do that, if you just want to sit back and just absorb some knowledge or just listen, then that's also awesome too. But you have that extra little option if you decide you want to treat it as a little pop quiz. Now, before we get into it, I'm going to point out that earlier this week, I released a video about the new lightning that was spoiled last week. And oh my goodness, did you guys like that video? That video is doing some bonkers numbers compared to standard for how things have been. It's already got more views than like half the videos I've put out in the last 3 months, and it's only been out for 2 days at the time that I'm recording this. So, wow. I don't know if you guys just really wanted to watch something about that new lightning, or if the thumbnail being a little bit more interesting than the ones that I usually make just like grabbed people's attention. They're like, I don't want to watch that. It was also the first thumbnail to actually have a picture of me on it, I think. So I don't know, maybe just all got pulled in by just all this here, or it could be that the algorithm is just smiling upon me this week. I don't know, we'll find out. But yeah, got tons of views and like watch time and everything. So if you're relatively new to watching these videos and to the channel, then I am so happy to have you here, and welcome. And if you've been watching stuff all along and you watched that one, then thank you for still being here, and welcome. I guess welcome doesn't make sense. You've been here, but welcome to this video at least. If you haven't watched that video yet, you should go check it out, because apparently it's pretty good. Word on the street is that it's pretty good. So I spent that video just going over all the interesting rules questions that are based around that effect that lightning has. Really interesting new unique effect of playing a forward onto the field that is already attacking and forming a party, and what all that stuff means. So if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. And if you already checked it out, watch it again. Why not? Anyway, enough about lightning. Let's talk about rules questions this week. So first up, we've got: if I cast Shiva and pay the additional cost while my opponent has Zenos, would I still have to discard, since technically the Shiva goes from stack to hand and not breakstone to hand? Let's talk about what these do here. So Shiva has this optional cost, right? The first part of her card says, if you cast Shiva, you may remove 4 ice cards in your breakstone from the game as an extra cost. And then her effect, you choose a character, you don't freeze it, and then it says, if you paid the extra cost, return Shiva to its owner's hand. Okay, we're going to come back to that in a second. Let's look at what Zenos has got going on. So the auto ability we're talking about here is the second one, which says, when a card in your opponent's break zone leaves the break zone, your opponent discards 1 card. This effect will trigger only once per turn. So the person asked the question, they have cast Shiva, they have paid the extra cost, their opponent has Zenos on the field, and they're wondering, is this going to trigger Zenos? Shiva here. And so this gets into kind of the normal process of casting a summon, which is not always obvious because we use the stack in a way that we don't normally use it. So summons, as a reminder, when we cast a summon, it goes to the stack, and because it's a card, it physically goes to the stack. Most of the things that do go on the stack for us, like abilities, like they go on the stack, but we have to kind of conceptually put them on the stack. We're not taking the card and picking it up and putting it on the stack, right? But it is there on the stack. With Shiva, we have a summon that's literally physically on the stack. The stack is a zone, right? And it just sits there in the zone until it resolves. And normally with a summon, when it resolves, then it moves from the stack to the break zone. Okay. Then this Shiva here, though, she has this extra cost, and when you pay it, it says, if you paid the extra cost, return Shiva to its owner's hand. Now that's part of the effect, right? And the effect has to completely resolve before Shiva would go to the break zone. So what's not happening here is that we are not having Shiva finish and then get put in the break zone, and then the effect moves her from the break zone to your hand. If that was the case, we would trigger Zenos, because we would have the Shiva in the break zone and then it would be leaving the break zone, which is what the trigger event is for Zenos' ability. However, because this is part of the effect, that means that what's happening is that Shiva is still sitting there on the stack, and then as part of the resolution, after you dull and freeze the character you chose, now Shiva just goes directly from the stack back to your hand. Never touches the break zone. Never goes into it, never comes out of it. It doesn't pass go, it doesn't collect $200. So, as the person who asked this did correctly guess, they said technically the Shiva goes from the stack to the hand. It's not technical. Literally, the Shiva goes from stack to hand. So, because it never even touches the break zone, yep, it's not going to trigger Zenos. So, Zenos cries a little bit that he doesn't get to see Shiva go into or out of the break zone and get his little fun bits there. So, yeah, that's the answer for that one. All right, here we've got, it's a mirror retainers match. My opponent does cast a forward with Noctis on the field to kill my Noctis. I want to cast Q-Sith on the stack to take back mid. Can I return mid to hand and then play mid to protect my Noctis? Now, if you couldn't follow everything that's going on there, I'll come back to it. But let's talk about what these cards have going on. So, Noctis here, his auto ability says, when a wind or earth forward other than Noctis enters your field, you choose a forward the opponent controls, and the forward that entered deals damage equal to the power of the chosen forward to the other forward. Deals damage equal to their power to the chosen forward, right? So it's a one-way damage going from the forward that got played to the one that was chosen. So they're said as a mirror match, right? So the person asking, they've got Noctis, and the opponent has Noctis as well. The opponent has now just played a forward that's going to trigger their Noctis, and going, and then when that triggers, they're choosing the person who's asking's Noctis. Player A, let's say player A's Noctis gets chosen. And presumably that forward that was played is at least 7,000 power, so it'll deal enough damage to break Noctis. Now mid, her ability, first off, she has back attack, and second off, she has an auto ability that says when mid enters the field, choose one forward other than mid you control. Until the end of the turn, it gains plus 1,000 power, and this forward cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. Reminder here that back attack, what back attack means is that it's a keyword that's a field ability that allows you to cast this character just about any time that you have priority. Can't cast in the end phase because you can't cast anything in the end phase, but allows you to cast it when you have priority, including the times you wouldn't normally be able to cast a character. So you can cast mid during your attack phase, and you can also cast mid during your opponent's main phase 1, attack phase, or main phase 2. And just any of those priorities within those phases, you can cast mid or any back attack character. So what this person wants to do, we've established that they played it forward, they chose player A's Noctis, so that's on the stack, right? It hasn't resolved yet. What they want to do is they have mid in their break zone, and they're like, can I cast Q-Sith to get mid back, to play mid, to give Noctis protection before all this happens? The answer is yes, but let's go over how it's going to all play out. So that Noctis effect is on the stack, right? Then player A is going to cast Q-Sith. Q-Sith goes on the stack. They're choosing mid in the break zone. Assuming nothing else happens and they both pass priority without doing anything, Q-Sith resolves. Mid gets brought back to player A's hand. Okay, we still got that Noctis effect sitting on the stack. Now that Noctis effect is not going to resolve until the things above it have resolved and both players again pass priority without doing anything. So at this point, because player A got the mid back into their hand, now is when they want to cast mid. So they go ahead and cast mid. Casting a character is a special action that does not use the stack, by the way. So they cast mid, and mid just pops in right away. There's no chance for the opponent to respond to that. What they can respond to is that when mid enters, mid's auto ability does trigger, which is going to choose player A's Noctis, right? So now that's on the stack. So we still got that Noctis effect waiting on the bottom. And then we've now got mid's ability on the stack that's chosen Noctis. Again, assuming nothing else gets activated, cast, we're done, and we get to resolving here. Mid resolves and now has given player A's Noctis plus 1,000, and this forward can't be chosen by opponent's abilities. And then if nothing else happens, now we finally get to that Noctis effect that's been chilling here while this other stuff's been going on, fireworks and all that. And when we go to resolve that, at this point, it checks for the validity of anything that it chose, which in this case is player A's Noctis. And it checks that, and it goes, oh, well, actually, that Noctis can't be chosen by abilities now. So actually, we can't do anything about Noctis, because it was the only only thing that was chosen, rather, and that the only thing that was chosen is now invalid. The entire effect gets canceled. So, long way of explaining that, yes, you can do this, but it's important to know all the details of how that works. Make sure you get the timing right on it and all that. So, yeah, it's a fun little play to sneak in mid there and then make it so Noctis can't be touched. Next question is, can I stack the cost reduction on these two cards so that Zack would cost 0? Or does the it cannot become 0 text on Genesis prevent it from ever being reduced to 0? Soldier fun here we've got. So Zack has the field ability here that says, if you control a category 7 character of an element other than lightning, the cost to cast Zack is reduced by 2. So normally his cost is 5. And if you control a 7 character that isn't a lightning element, then it gets reduced by 2. So in normal circumstances, that would make Zack cost 3. Important to note that this cost reduction effect doesn't say anything in there about not being able to be reduced to 0. It just says reduce it by 2. We're all done there. Now Genesis has the auto ability that says when a job soldier enters your field, then you select one of the 3 following actions, and the one that they're choosing for this question obviously is the one that says during this turn the cost required to cast your next job soldier is reduced by 3, and then very importantly here in parentheses it says it cannot become 0. So they're asking, because Genesis, so let's say that what they're doing here is they cast Genesis, and then on the same turn now they want to cast Zack right after the Genesis's auto ability resolves. And they're like, hey, can I play Zack for 0? Because the logic here, which, I totally get how you come with this logic, is to go, okay, well, Genesis is going to reduce the cost by 3 first, and it says it can't be 0, but it's not. That's great. We went from 5 to 2. And then we're going to take Zack's reduction and go, okay, well, Zack's going to go from 2 to 0. And that's fine, right? Because going from 2 to 0 here, it doesn't say you can't reduce it to 0. So that's how that would work, right? And I can see where that logic would, you could think of like the order of things that, sure, like if we can resolve it that way, if you want to think of it that way, then that would work. Unfortunately, it does not work. It doesn't work, partially because we're not going to resolve these reductions in any sort of order. We're going to apply them all at once. And the way it works with cost reduction is that you have to account for all different things that affect the cost, whether it's reduction or whether it's actually adding to the cost. You have to account for all those things to come up with the final cost. And if any of those things that are affecting the cost say that it cannot become 0, then no matter what happens, it cannot become 0. So, and this is not optional, right? If there's an effect out there that's affecting the cost, you can't choose to make it reduced or not reduced. An example here would be let's say Zack's effect instead said that you reduced by 5, right? So let's say that Zack, if you had a 7 character other than lightning, just made him 0, right? Well, let's say that you had resolved the Genesis already, and you're like, oh, I don't even need that reduction of 3 because Zack's going to be 0, right? So I want to play Zack. Well, he's not going to be 0 because you have to apply both of them. Or if you use the Tilka backup that turn, for example, that says all the characters that you cast this turn are reduced by 1, even if you didn't need that reduction by 1, because it's something that does affect Zack's cost, it's not going to be able to be 0. So, yeah, it's a bummer. But, you can stack these together to make it so Zack costs 1, right? You can still do that. But, yeah, if you have multiple things that are affecting cost, and at least one of those things that's affecting the cost says it cannot become 0, then you are bound by that. Little side rant here, if you'll bear with me. The vast majority of the time that we have something in parentheses, it's reminder text, right? The thing about reminder text is Reminder text is, the whole point of it is that it's there to remind you about something, but it's not necessary. The vast majority of the time that we have reminder text, it's stuff that is already built into the rules, and they just put it in there because maybe you're going to forget, or they know that it might be an issue, so they're just going to put it in there. But technically, if you were to take that reminder text out, the card still functions exactly the same. This is one of the few exceptions to that, and it bugs me that we have exceptions to that, because reminder text and this, which is not reminder text, they use the same like parentheses at the end of something, and it just annoys me because it makes it seem like it's reminder text, but it's not. Because again, if you took out the "it cannot become zero" here, then that would make it so you could do this to make it become zero, right? So that "it cannot become zero" is not actually reminder text, right? It's an important part of the effect that is not necessarily built into cost reduction. So I really wish they had just not put these in parentheses, right? If they just make it be part of the written text here, if just, reduce it by 3 and it cannot become 0, or reduce it by 3 period, and then just a new sentence, not in parentheses, it just says it cannot become 0. I don't know, something like that would have been better, but it just bothers me because again, vast majority of the time, if it's in parentheses, it's reminder text. This is not actually reminder text. It just looks like it. It's a facsimile of reminder text. Anyway, thank you for bearing with me for that rant. If the new Shantotto chooses 2 active forwards, and in response, the chosen forwards are dulled by the time you resolve Shantotto, does she still break the forwards? This is our new Shantotto that we have coming out in the new set, spoiled a few days ago at this point. And just look at her. Look how happy Shantotto looks. Look at that just bright smile right there. She's just living her best life, and no one's aware that she's like 2 seconds away from unleashing magic of mass destruction. But she's living her best life, and I'm happy for her. Anyway, her effect here says when Shantotto enters the field, choose up to 2 active forwards opponent controls, break them. Whew, that's pretty straightforward, right? Not a lot of text here. She just nukes things. But they're asking about what happens if those active forwards are now not active when it resolves. And this goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier with the Noctis thing, which is that when we choose our targets, we're checking for the validity. Wow. I'm just having some interesting words today. Check for the validity of the targets, both when we are choosing them and also when we're resolving the effect. So when you're choosing for Shantotto, it's checking right then, are they active forwards? If they're not active forwards, they're not a valid target. You can't even choose them at all. But then in between this being put on the stack and choosing the targets, and then when it finally resolves, because there could be all sorts of other stuff that gets stacked above it and then resolving, when it finally resolves, it's going to check one more time, are those targets that we chose both active forwards? And in this case, their question is, what if they said chosen 4 words, so I'm assuming they're saying what if both of them are dulled by the time you resolve Shantotto? So when she resolves, if they're both dull, that means they're both now invalid targets, because it required them to be active forwards, not just when you're putting on the stack, but again, we're checking again when we are resolving. And so, if they're both not active, then that means they're now both invalid targets, which means that the effect self-cancels. They didn't ask this question, but it's worth reminding you about what happens if one of them is dull and the other one's not dull. In that case, when an effect chooses one or more targets and it resolves, if at least one of the targets that it chose is still valid, then the effect resolves as much as possible. So if one of them became dull, or one of them left the field, or one of them is not able to be chosen by abilities anymore, or one of them went to get a snow cone, I don't know, then it'll still resolve on the other one. The one that's active still gets nuked by Shantotto, and the other one avoids it and enjoys that snow cone. So that's how that works there. All right, this is a long question, so I'll show you the card that they're asking about in a moment here, but this is just so much text. Okay, they're asking about Reno. This is the Reno that came out in Opus 25. It says, does Reno's effect trigger for each dulled forward or for each dull effect? Example 1. I have Reno, Rude, and Rufus on the field at the same time, and I enter the attack phase. This causes Rude to dull a forward and Reno to trigger. Next, Rufus attacks and its effect dulls another forward. Then Reno should trigger again, right? Example 2. I have Reno and Zeromus on the field. At the end of my opponent's turn, all of his forwards are dulled. Does Reno now trigger only once for the entire effect or once for each of the forwards that are dulled? So twice for 2 forwards. Okay, that's our 2 scenarios we're asking about. Let's look at Reno to see what's going on. Reno's effect says, when an active forward opponent controls becomes dull due to your summon or ability, select up to 2 of the 2 following actions. And then the actions don't matter here because we're not actually asking about those. We're just trying to figure out the triggering bit. So in their first scenario, they said they had this Reno, they also had Rude, the Opus 25 Rude, and they had a Rufus on the field. And they say, okay, they moved to the attack phase, and that Rude, he has an auto ability at the beginning of the attack phase that chooses a forward and dulls it. So like, okay, so we moved to the attack phase, triggers Rude, Rude dulls something, and that triggers Reno, right? Because his trigger event is an active forward the opponent controls becoming dull due to your summoner ability. That's a mouthful, but that's the trigger event. So yes, it would trigger in that scenario. And then they say, okay, now they go to the declaring an attack, and they attack with Rufus. This is the Rufus that when it attacks, you can choose a forward opponent controls and dull freeze it. So they're saying, all right, now if I attack with Rufus and I dull freeze something else, is that going to trigger Reno again? And the answer here is yes, mostly because Reno doesn't have a restriction on his auto ability. It doesn't say it only triggers once per turn or even once per phase or something, right? There's no restriction. So as long as the trigger event happens, we're going to keep getting this however many times it happens. And these are 2 separate instances, so it's very clear in this scenario, right? We had Rude do his own thing, and then we had Rufus do his own thing, and in both cases, Reno is like, gotcha. So yeah. That's straightforward. Now, the other question was about Zeromus, and this is the Lightning Ice Zeromus that has an auto ability. It says at the end of the opponent's turn, all the forwards opponent controls becomes dull. So they're saying, okay, if my opponent controls 2 active forwards and they go to the end of their turn, and then my Zeromus effect causes those 2 forwards to become dull, is that going to trigger Reno once or is it going to trigger Reno twice? And the important thing here is if we look back at the trigger event and the way that it's worded, it says when an active forward opponent controls becomes dull due to your summoner ability. So the trigger here is for a single forward becoming dull. And in this case, we have 2 instances of a single forward becoming dull. Now it is off the same effect, right? Zeromus, it's one effect doing that to multiple forwards, but because of the way Reno is worded, he doesn't care that it's one effect doing it. He's just looking at the instances of a forward becoming dull due to abilities or summons. And an example of what his effect would look like if it didn't work that way, that always is a good one to keep in mind, is the Wind Legend Cecil. It's really popular right now. His auto ability says when one or more forwards that you control, or no, characters I think it is, when one or more characters you control are chosen by an opponent's summoner ability, and then they have to do the thing of paying, right? But the trigger event there is when one or more. That's the distinction here, right? One or more means that the trigger event now, if it's one thing that happened, but it's more than one, it's just one trigger. But here, because it doesn't say when one or more active forwards opponent controls, it says when an active forward opponent controls becomes dull. So because of that, even though it's one action that's causing this to happen multiple times, we don't care that it's one action causing it. We just care that the trigger event happened more than once. So Reno will trigger twice there, just like he triggered twice for 2 separate instances in the first question. Next up, it says, such an odd card. How does Riku interact with battle? Is that basically just during damage step while attacking? I love this question because it just gets into such like this weird little corner of rules that like they themselves, Hobby Japan, has done so little with this corner of rules. Like they kind of opened this up as a thing and they defined it, and then they kind of used the concept twice and then never came back to it. And so I get where you're looking back at this Opus 6 card and being like, what in the heck is battle? Let's read it though. So she's got a special ability that says, it's called Escape. And it simply says, remove Riku from the battle. You can only use this ability when Riku is in battle. And you would be forgiven for reading that effect and going, what in the heck is battle? I've never seen battle referenced on another card before. There's like nothing in the rules that mention battle, right? We have the attack phase, we have attacking, we have blocking, we have damage resolution. What is battle? How are we defining battle? Is that when we have effects that choose two forwards and they deal damage to each other? Is that battle? Is blocking a forward battle? Like, is it anytime the two forwards are dealing damage to each other like that? What's going on here? Luckily, this Riku has an FAQ entry to clear that up for us, because she was the first and basically the only character to reference battle directly. There's one that references battle indirectly that I'll mention in a second, but she's the only one that actually uses like battle in this way. For 19 sets since then, they've never gone back to mentioning battle. And what battle is when you have a forward that is attacking and a blocker has been declared. They're in battle at that point. If you have a forward that's attacking and a blocker has not been declared, there is no battle. No battle going on. That's just someone being aggressive, about to punch you in the face, right? So battle is specifically when there's an attacker and a blocker, right? And then even if you had an attacker and a blocker and then the blocker gets removed, okay, well now there's no longer a battle going on. Or you had an attacker and a blocker, the attacker gets removed. No longer a battle. So battle is just specifically in the attack phase when there's an attacking forward and there's a blocking forward. They are in battle. So the way her effect works is that they are in battle, and this is before the damage resolution phase, because after damage resolution, chances are at least one of them is broken or removed in some way, and they're definitely not in battle if one of them is gone. So the way this works is that like you would declare Riku as a blocker, and then there's that priority that exists between block declaration and damage resolution. So at that point, doesn't matter whether your Riku is the attacker or your Riku is the blocker, you can use this escape special, and it says remove Riku from the battle. So it suddenly just makes it so she's no longer attacking or no longer blocking or whatever she was doing before that point. That being said, because we had an attacker and a blocker, no matter what happens, that attack is blocked, right? And but basically no one's going to deal any damage to each other, because by the time you get to the damage resolution step, there's no longer two forwards to deal damage to each other. And if there's a forward that was still attacking, it is considered blocked because there was a blocker declared. So it's this card basically that special exists just to get Riku out of a bind. If you attacked with Riku and then they blocked and you realized, oh no, I do not want this to go down the way that it's about to go down, you can use the special. She's removed from battle, and she's not going to take damage from damage resolution. Or the other way around, they attack with something and you're like, okay, throw Riku in there, and then she blocks and you're like, oh, I don't actually want her to do the blocking here, but now that I've declared a block, she's going to escape, and she stays on the field, but she's no longer in battle. So that's how that works. Now, the other thing I mentioned that like references battle in a way is there's the starter Wind Cane, the Holy Dragoon Cane, infamously, and he has a field ability that says he doesn't take a damage from anything except for battle damage, right? So that's a fun one. Doesn't take damage except for battle damage. And so battle damage got defined as the damage that is done when you have an attacking forward and a blocking forward, and you do the damage resolution step and they deal damage to each other. That is battle damage. Again, if you had like a Hecaton Care or something that causes forwards to deal damage to each other directly, some effect like that, not considered battle damage, even though you might think it would make sense. It's very similar in kind of how things resolve. Not considered battle damage. So yeah, the only cards we've had that use the word battle is this Riku, who mentions battle, and then that Kane, who references battle damage. And then they, for whatever reason, they either decided they didn't want to explore that design space, or they just went, you know what, this is too messy. Let's just not talk about battle anymore. I don't know. but it's a fun one. It's kind of makes for a little like rules trivia. All right, this one says, can your opponent use Titan in response to a swing from Ifrit 16? If so, does it die before damage goes through, or does Ifrit effect resolve? So we have a Titan here, and it's got two choices, but the second one is what's relevant here, which is it says choose one dull forward and break it. So they're saying that Ifrit attacked, right? So Ifrit attacked, became dull, and they want to cast Titan on it and break it, but they're like, is Ifrit gonna get his effect? Now, reading his effect one more time. His auto ability says, when Ifrit 16 enters the field, deals damage to your opponent, or when Clive primes into Ifrit 16, choose one forward opponent controls, deal it 10,000 damage. So we have three different potential trigger events for Ifrit 16. The first one is entering the field. Second one is dealing damage to the opponent, and the third one is Clive priming into Ifrit. Now, for this question, they're asking about it with attacking, so we can eliminate the entering the field. We can eliminate the priming into Ifrit. This is just Ifrit is attacking, and they're wondering if we can break him with Titan without that resolving. And the answer here is yes, because from the time that Ifrit attacks, you're going to have at least one round of priority. There's going to be the round of priority after declaring the attack, and then also after the block declaration step, there's another round of priority before you get to damage resolution. And so his trigger doesn't happen until he actually deals the damage, which happens in damage resolution. So during those two priorities that exist there, you can cast Titan, you can break Ifrit, and at that point, he's no longer on the field to deal any damage, so he's not going to be able to trigger the auto ability. So yeah, absolutely. And you can go ahead and just Titan that Ifrit and get yourself out of a bind there. So if this is in play and the opponent does the normal priming and searches their deck and puts it out, do they still have to pay the extra 2 to put it in the field as well, or does it still go through? I would think they need to pay the extra, but I'm still rusty on all of priming's things. This Remedi, she has an auto ability. It says, when your opponent plays a character onto the field other than from his or her hand, if your opponent doesn't pay 2, break it. They want to know if they've got Remedi out, if the opponent is priming, if they're going to have to pay this too. And basically, there's something with priming that I hope everybody just gets seared into their brains. All right? So be ready for this right here. Just commit this to memory. When a character primes, it is not a new character entering the field. I'm going to say that again. When a character primes, it is not a new character entering the field. I'm going to say it a third time because I just really want everybody to remember this. When a character enters the field. Oh, I said it wrong. I was so worked up I said it wrong. When a character primes, it is not a new character entering the field. What it is it's the existing character that did the priming having all of their game text overwritten with the game text of the card on top, with the exception that it keeps its original card name, keeps its original card name in addition to all the new text that has been overwritten. So, knowing that, we know that this will not trigger Remedi, because Remedi's trigger event is when your opponent plays a character onto the field other than from his or her hand. And since priming is not a character entering the field, it's not going to trigger Remedi. Now, we're talking about priming. And since we're talking about priming, if you've been watching long enough, you know, I am like contractually obligated to bring up that I have a video all about priming. All about priming. And you can go watch it on the same channel that you're watching this one on right now. You could pause this and then go and then click that video and watch it and then come back and then resume this, or you can go and like open that in a new tab and then just let that chill, finish this video, and then when this one's done, go over there and then watch that. Just a couple options there for you. But I answer all sorts of things about priming. There's a question about Remedi, but I think it's the other Remedi, not this one, with priming. Spoiler alert, Remedi, not as useful in multiple iterations with dealing with priming, as you might hope for. But anyway, so yeah, there's that. Ready for more priming questions? We're going to do more priming questions. Hey all, we had an interesting situation during one of our game nights. One player played a Clive. Then on the next turn, the second player played a Melusine, taking control of Clive. Then he primed the Clive into Ifrit 16, as he too was playing it in his deck. Now the question came, will he retain control of the primed Ifrit Clive, Clifrit as I like to call him, or will it return to Clive's owner? This is a fun situation. So, to set the stage, make sure we're all clear on what's going on here. Player A plays Clive. And then they do whatever with Clive. They maybe probably attack with it or whatever. Didn't prime him, but just played Clive. Eventually passed the turn. Player B plays Melusine and targets Clive, because at that point, Clive still has his original text. He's a 4 CP forward. He's a valid target for Melusine. And then Clive gets stolen, right? So now player B controls Clive until the end of the turn. Melusine's effect says until the end of the turn. Player B also has a Ifrit 16 in their deck. So they go, you know what? To heck with it. I am going to prime this Clive that I just stole. I'm going to prime him. Whew. They go into their deck. They search the Ifrit 16. They pop it on top of Clive. We now have a primed Clive. And they do whatever they do at that point with the primed Clive. And then the end of the turn comes. And since Melusine says you control it until the end of the turn, now they're asking, what happens? We have this primed Clive that's now this mixture of, it's the opponent's Clive that I took, but I've put my Ifrit on top. What's going to happen with this card here? Who controls it? Who owns it? Like, does Melusine, does she know that it used to be that Clive and so forth? We're going to go back to the mantra from the last question, which is that when a character primes, it is not a new character entering the field. So if we understand that, we know that this Clive that is primed is still the same Clive that it was that got targeted by the Melusine, and the effects know that as well. The game knows that as well. So because of that, it knows that this is a character that you do not own. It doesn't matter that your Ifrit is on top of it now. This is a character you do not own, and at the end of the turn, that effect's going to wear off, and it's going to go whoop back to your opponent. So I hope that you enjoyed having your primed Ifrit for that turn, because now you've just handed a primed Ifrit back to your opponent, and now they've got it. It's a fun interaction. I like that part of it. But yeah, it's if you can get good value out of it before it goes back, then good for you. But you're about to just hand back a primed for free Clifrit to your opponent that they can do stuff with it on their turn. So hopefully if you're stealing this with Melusine, it's because you're going to win that turn. But yeah, that's how that resolves. Last question, and we're still talking about Ifrit. We're still talking about 16 related stuff. We have this little kind of 16 section of the end of today here. But last question, it says, this new Ifrit 16, how does it interact with Amaterasu choosing the first ability? Would the ability go on the stack when it's chosen, then still resolve during the going down the stack and then be no more, or would it prevent it from going on the stack or resolving? I'm going to be honest with you, just like I had to slow down and reread the middle of that. The first time I read this, I was not sure what this person was asking. Trying to decipher these words into what a question was tough. Let's go back to the question in a second. Let's talk about what this Ifrit's doing. This Ifrit also was just spoiled in the last few days. So if you've forgotten his text already, or you haven't seen him, let's talk about it. He says, when Ifrit 16 is blocked or chosen by your opponent's ability, Ifrit 16 deals your opponent 1 point of damage. I'll read it again since I screwed that up. When Ifrit 16 is blocked or chosen by your opponent's ability, Ifrit 16 deals your opponent 1 point of damage. So this is an auto ability that triggers when it's chosen by an ability or blocked, but we're not going to talk about blocking right now because that's not part of the question they're asking. So they're asking what happens if Ifrit's been chosen by something and then they want to Amaterasu it. They want to cancel the auto ability. And presumably what they're asking is, does the Amaterasu cause the auto ability to trigger again, which is then now still going to deal damage? And there's two reasons why it's definitely not going to do that. The first one is the basic one you should always remember about Amaterasu, which is that Amaterasu, I know I don't have it on the screen right now, but Amaterasu, it does not choose characters. Amaterasu chooses an auto ability. So it gets around all sorts of things that either can't be chosen or that have an auto ability that triggers when it's chosen. Amaterasu chooses the auto ability. So for that reason, it would not trigger Ifrit 16. The more important reason why it would not trigger Ifrit 16's auto ability is because his auto ability says when he's chosen by your opponent's ability, and Amaterasu is a summon. So wouldn't get triggered there anyway, even if the Amaterasu did choose Ifrit. So yeah, for those reasons, it's not going to do that again. So if this had triggered, you can Amaterasu it, and you're not going to take the point of damage. You're not going to cause another iteration of the auto ability to trigger, and it'll deal the 8,000 damage to Ifrit and all that there. That being said, if there was a trigger of this on the stack already, and then Ifrit got chosen by another ability, then it would trigger again. But that's just kind of getting away from what the question is here. So yeah, that's how you resolve Amaterasu with Ifrit. Is actually it's pretty dang effective, because it doesn't piss Ifrit off enough for him to trigger again, I guess. All right, that's the last question for today. So if you were keeping track of your score there, I hope you got a good score. You have to score yourself here. Obviously, I don't know how you did, but yeah, those are our 10 questions for this week. And thanks for watching. You can always go watch those other videos that I mentioned. I have the lightning video from this week, the Let's Talk About Lightning, and then the Judge Jared Explains Priming video that I mentioned in the middle there. And yeah, you can check out literally all the other stuff that I have going on YouTube, right? My channel is youtube.com/@JudgeJared. You can find me on Facebook, or my Facebook page is facebook.com/JudgeJared. On Twitter, if you want to follow me, if you want to like my tweets, if you want to tweet at me, any of that stuff there, send me a message, whatever. I am at Judge Jared FFTCG on Twitter, and on Discord, if you want to send me a message there, my username is Judge Jared on Discord. So yeah, those are all places that you can find me. And oh yeah, like and subscribe this video, right? Because why not? If you're here this far, then I hope that you like the video. I hope that you are subscribed. But if you haven't done one or both those things, feel free to do both those things, or one of those things, whatever works there. I'm getting rambly, so should cut things off there, huh? All right. As always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you so much to the people who are new subscribers this week, and to the people who've been subscribed for a while and all that. That's all I got for today, I think. So, as always, I'm Judge Jared. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, court is adjourned.